So hi, what's up? I'm Ruby-Rose Pivet-Marsh and I'm the Artistic Director of the Emerging Writers Festival. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this, our very online launch of our very online program for 2020. When I got offered the role of EWF AD at the start of the year, I was on Bourke Street and I was about to hop on a tram. Instead, I had to step into Maya to collect myself, and I'm not sure if this is the case for anyone else, but the overwhelming perfume of the beauty counters just shocks my system and gives me a bit of a reboot. So once that was done, I got on the 86 and I went to see a friend read at an event. And I don't mention that because of how I felt or how excited and overwhelmed I was at the prospect of this job, even though I was and I still am. I mention it because that was the very last arts event that I attended for the year. Pretty soon after, COVID-19 really took hold and became the thing that I think, I'm pretty sure everyone was hoping that it really wouldn't. It's only June now, but this year has already been weird and scary and quick and fast moving, but also halted in this really eerie stillness. Things are constantly changing and yet they're entirely immovable at the same time. The decision to present a fully digital program for EWF 20 was probably the easiest choice that we've had to make this year because we've had to make a lot of other difficult decisions. But we've run the Digital Writers Festival since 2014, and our EWF 19 program was especially dedicated to presenting online panels, projects, and performances. It's something we felt we could, should, and above everything else really wanted to do. I don't want to get too emotional or speak with ridiculous grandeur, but as my incredible, wonderful co-CEO Alice Muelling says, turning this ship around halfway through its journey and steering it in some kind of direction when everything else seems a bit directionless has been a task. And I'm really grateful that she is my co-captain during this time. So with all that said, welcome to EWF 20. Welcome to our program launch, where we are taking some time to reflect on formative forays into the world of digital technology. Personally, my first digital adventure was playing a game called Storybook Weaver at school, which is maybe showing my age and most definitely explaining a lot regarding my own artistic practice and career choices. Storybook Weaver was a mid-90s educational computer game that allowed users to create their own narratives and adventures from a series of settings and add-ons. Every moment of free time I found at school, I would play that game, creating worlds and characters and problems to solve. You could go wherever your mind took you and then you could download it and print it off and you'd have a book. This year, that ability to take yourself elsewhere through creativity or process things happening to or around you seems to be even more important, but it's also, a lot harder to do. So every year, EWF brings together a community of writers. It's what we do. We're a festival for and largely by writers and avid readers, and community is always at the focus. Just like creativity, community and care are vital always, but even more right now. For 2020, projects have been a huge focus in our programming. We wanted to give space to artists to create, and so we have an entire stream dedicated to just that. We're giving in to brief moments of happiness with the songs that put us in a really nice, warm place on playlist Joy. We are launching our very own experimental digital publication called Emerge, and also giving space to our wonderful friends at VoiceWorks, Liminal, Rabbit, and Southside Collective to launch their publications. We're again running EWFX in collaboration with collectives who hold community action and collective art at the heart of their practice. And the National Writers' Conference is happening again, running for one day and focusing on the craft, ethics, and business of writing. It's during the National Writers' Conference that our wonderful ambassadors, Amy McGuire, JP Pamari, Omar Seika, and Carrie Tiffany will give their tips for writing and present specialised keynote sessions. Finally, we have some really exciting performance events, including the Bogong Black Futures, which we are so proud and excited to present with Black and Bright to open EWF, and Kiss Me Through the Phone, which is a very unsubtle ode to Soulja Boy, but also a gentle nod to intimacy and love in all its forms. To talk a bit more about what digital nostalgia is and means, it is my great pleasure to introduce Millie Baylis and 4 of our favourite writers, Bridget Caldwell-Bright, Panda Wong, Alistair Baldwin, and Jamie Marina Lau. First up, Millie Baylis. Millie is a writer, editor, and arts worker living on Wurundjeri land. In 2019, she was a Wheeler Centre Hot Desk Fellow and the managing editor of Visible Inc. In 2020, she's a Moreland Writer-in-Residence. She writes essays, memoir, and commentary, and her work has recently appeared in Kill Your Darlings, Overland, and The Victorian Writer. Millie is also EWF's brilliant program coordinator, and she's going to tell you a bit more about the EWF program, including her highlights. Please welcome Millie.
Hello, good evening. My name is Millie, and I'm so excited to be the program coordinator at this year's Emerging Writers Festival. I'm recording today from the unceded sovereign lands of the Wurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to any elders and First Nations people that this broadcast reaches. When I was thinking about this event and about my own limited digital memories as a millennial, I decided to ask my mum about hers. She remembers the first time she ever found out that there was this new thing called the internet. She remembers firing it up for the first time in the small sunroom of our old Sydney flat and staring at an empty Alta Vista page. Then she searched for the ER episode guide because what else was she meant to do? Now, of course, the internet is both the TV guide and the TV. And in countless other ways, it's becoming harder and harder to separate the URL and the IRL. When we first talked about moving the festival online to help keep each other safe, we decided to lean into this sort of lockdown-induced regression into our teenage selves, where everyone is suddenly playing Animal Crossing and where the state rules of how many people we can see has reminded many of us of choosing our MySpace top 8. And so we asked 4 brilliant emerging writers, who you will hear from shortly, about the times that they found or failed to find connection online. For me, being online was an integral part of growing up and growing into the world. As a preteen, I'd take a long bus and a long train into the city to meet strangers from MySpace on the Flinders Street steps. In my late teens, I found Tumblr feminism and social justice blogs, which entirely reshaped my ideas about the world. As a chronically ill adult, there have been months where I basically lived online, unable to physically leave the house. I spent days on Facebook groups talking to other chronically ill people, sharing memes about being sick, and coordinating rosters to help drop off deliveries for one another when we were well enough to. I don't know how I would have survived if these caring online spaces didn't exist. I found the online writing community to be amazing too, where writers are constantly reading and encouraging each other's work. The Emerging Writers Festival has been a huge part of this, especially with its Digital Writers Festival, which has helped allow people like me and others with various barriers to attending physical events to tune into literary events from the comfort of our own homes. And so, while of course I wish that we could have a normal festival this year, I'm also really excited to help deliver a festival that will in many ways be more accessible to many. And I hope that the greater accessibility that this moment has forced will continue across the board long after lockdowns are lifted. Saying all this, I know that the internet is not just this utopic place for connection either. There are many reasons why one would want to log off, from surveillance capitalism and carefully programmed algorithms that keep us online and keep us buying more, to the 24/7 news that presses on our nervous systems, to the obsession with the perfect curated internet self, to the internet cloud that creates a literal cloud of carbon pollution. And yet, I only know about these things from reading about them on the internet. Despite our internet-influenced impulse to quickly decide something pure or impure, good or bad, cancelled or not, and the fact that I'm still barely able to comprehend the complexities of our new digital technologies, there is also undeniably great comfort and community to be found online. And this matters. I'm trying really hard not to say now more than ever. I know in the middle of a global pandemic, it feels like a really strange time to write. I felt really aware of this when inviting writers to share their work for the festival. It's hard to think about writing when we've barely processed the scale of what's happened this year and what might happen next. I've seen writers being hard on themselves for not using their isolation time to write their book, or questioning how anything they write could have much value right now. Others are recommending we all keep diaries for historical purposes of this time, to serve as a record. During my first month of self-isolation, I went for a weekly walk by the lake with my mask on and watched the ducks going on as normal. I kept wondering, do the animals know what's happening? Those sweet, stupid ducks were the only thing I was able to write a sentence about for months. Alexander Chee wrote about a sort of global writer's block that happened after 9/11. He said that writers couldn't think of writing anything that approached the scale of the attacks, as if this were the task. Many years later, on the morning after the 2016 US election, his creative writing students asked what was the point when something like that could happen. I'm thinking about this again now, as we see the rise of ableist pro-eugenics rhetoric and death toll infographics and mounting unemployment and land that's still barely recovered from the summer bushfires and people in prisons who don't even have access to soap during the pandemic. And people in the US now rising again against another Black Death by police, something that's still happening to First Nations people here too. And the president threatening to shoot rioters via Twitter. All of this can make it feel exceptionally hard or frivolous to think about writing. Alexander Chee later wrote, "It's a strange time to write stories, but I think it always is. This is just our strange time." Eleanor Savage, previous EWF artist, also tried to answer this question from her own creative writing students here. Why write when there is so much horror in the world? Savage writes, "Privately, I think, what has horror got to do with writing or not writing? I think there is sweetness in the world too, and scatological humour." Then later, she reflects that the doubting writer, an earnest one, is often just seeking confirmation. She says, "A nod of the head at just the right time, someone to confirm, it's allowed. You're allowed to write, and you're allowed to read, despite or because of the horror." What better place than the Emerging Writers Festival to help give the doubting writer the permission they might need to write and to read, as well as the confirmation that writing is important in our own very strange time. All of which brings me to this year's incredibly exciting and fully online program that I can't wait to share with you. It's been a dream to work with the EWF team, where we've tried to create a program that can both help offer some tools and ideas to help process the state of the world, as well as the opportunity to escape into other worlds entirely. From Writing Through Crisis, where 3 writers will look at the year we've had and consider the act of creating during crises, to The Cost of Writing, where we'll ask how writers can survive in an arts industry that must often fend for itself. We'll also hear from contributors to the Growing Up Disabled in Australia anthology about what it's meant to postpone the release of their book and how the pandemic has specifically affected disabled writers. We have a bunch of incredible performances, from visual storytelling about the climate crisis to our annual Amazing Babes event, where an exceptional lineup of writers will close the festival with odes to the special ones who inspire them, followed by a DJ set for us to dance from our homes and celebrate the festival together. We also have a large focus on the craft of writing, from workshops where you can take your pick from learning about podcasting, writing for lit journals and writing memoir, to panels about writing comedy, editing poetry, the art of the essay, and more. And make sure to have a look at all of the new pieces of work that we'll publish on the first day of the festival, from Meme Girls, a collection of experimental essays about internet culture, to Poetry in Motion, a group of poetic videos about movement, to Space Mall, an interactive choose-your-own-adventure Twitter story that asks what class, race and gender relations might look like in space. The entire program will be live on our website as soon as the event is finished, so we hope that you'll go check it out and book yourself in for a bunch of events. I hope that this year's Emerging Writers Festival will help remind you that words and stories are still and always are important and necessary and meaningful, as well as fun and pleasurable and ridiculous. So for now, settle in as we celebrate writing and digital spaces and writing in digital spaces in all of its nostalgic glory from some of our favourite emerging writers. And I can't wait to see you online at the festival.
Next up, we have Panda Wong. Panda is a poet and editor based in Nam. She's been published in Runway Journal, The Lifted Brow, Rabbit, Sick Leave, Free Association, and more. Her practice is currently centred around figuring out how to pronounce Elon Musk and Grimes' baby's name.
Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'm privileged to write and work on this land and want to honour them as the original imaginers, dreamers and storytellers. Hello. So this piece is called Panda-Shaped Holes. It's about my emo fantasy nostalgia youth. And I'd just like to thank Amy Yu for making this filter. This isn't my real face. It's called Emo Fantasy if you want to try it out. Thanks. Right now I'm at home in isolation trying to write this essay. My presence is flattened, virtual, spread out amongst several screens of varying sizes, a disembodied voice over FaceTime, a Zoom call that's reached its 40-minute limit, a languid Instagram post, a Zepeto avatar, frenzied Instagram stories, a mundane tweet, emails, oh god, the emails. Every perception of me is through a screen right now, but it doesn't feel so different. TBH, it just feels heightened. The internet is an oceanic place, in that it feels like floating adrift in an expanding collection of opinions, thoughts, images and sounds, all virtual ephemera lapping at the shores of my online body. The sensation of the online body melting away, overlapping with YouTube videos of rabbits sleeping surrounded by dill plants, blinking ads for hot Asian women in your boring suburban area, even though I am already my own hot Asian woman in my own boring suburban area. My last manic Google search twirling like a ribbon across my vision. As I peel myself away from one of my variously sized screens, my body reawakens with sore eyes, tense back, surely the beginnings of carpal tunnel syndrome flickering in my wrists. When I'm online, so much falls away for me to plunge back into, wash up on. During that very weird first stage of teenagehood, I was nearly obsessed with notions of the self and who I really was, and why being myself was so painful and so different and so hard to express. The urge to mold and shape an identity for myself drove my obsession with being the only emo in the village. I was hungry to be seen on my own terms, and if that meant trying to DIY pierce my nose, or bleaching my fringe with actual kitchen bleach, or stretching my earlobes until they were ringed with crusty pus, then so be it. So it made sense that my first online obsession was Vampire Freaks. Vampire Freaks was a social media website made for emos, goths, scene kids, and people who thought they were actual vampires, like MySpace but with industrial amounts of eyeliner and black nail polish. You made a profile where you would post pictures of yourself and people could vote for the top Vampire Freaks of the week, basically whoever was the hottest, but also who had the most facial piercings or the most raccoon stripes in their hair. My profile had a proliferation of lyrics, think My Chemical Romance, Dashboard Confessional, Fall Out Boy, The Used Senses Fail, and high contrast selfies with an intense downwards angle, emphasis on the heavy side fringe. I remember one Valentine's Day, it was a thing that everyone did where you could send black wilted roses to each other. I had 3 Vampire Freak crushes and sent them all black wilted roses which looked something like this. Asterisk sends black wilted rose, asterisk. This meme comes from a Junji Ito manga. A man is scaling a cliff. Next to him is a person-shaped hole, and he's shouting, "This is my hole, it was made for me." That was me when I found Vampire Freaks. Like, this is my hole, it was made for me. At the time I had several emo names. The formula of an emo name goes something like this. A relatively run-of-the-mill name and name of slightly controversial object, i.e. Amy Poison, Nikki Vomit, Molly Hardick. The one I used for Vampire Freaks was Amy Switchblade. Amy means friend in French, which I thought was fancy and innovative and empathetic. Switchblade meant that I was sensitive but tough but also edgy, and together I thought they were perfect for the very new, very complicated, and very sad me. I started speaking to Quinn Venom because I was lonely. He lived in Perth, I lived in Oman. We were separated by oceans, but Vampire Freaks brought us together. We would Skype each other and share parts of our life with each other. Song lyrics, new piercings, movies, books. Things felt real when he showed me a bag of motley teddy bears that he said he had shoplifted from a nearby shopping centre for me. That video call is the only one that I really remember. He had longish dark hair that ended at his shoulders and wore a white singlet. I could see out of his window. It was daytime. He had a single poster of my bloody Valentine lifting off his wall, an unremarkable, unmade single bed. You could positively smell the lynx wafting off his sheets. He took out each teddy at a time, gently and carefully so I could see it from every angle, giving them all their own emo names. His fingernails had chipped black nail polish, and I could see a constellation of fresh pink pimples underneath his fringe. There's nothing more tender than a crush's acne. I stopped talking to him when he asked me for nudes. In Don't Let Me Be Lonely, Claudia Rankin writes that the foundations for loneliness begin in the dreamscapes you create. The preconditions for my obsession with my emo proclivities and Vampire Freaks was my loneliness, a hope and desire for a community where my feelings weren't seen as clumsy, my sensitivity as alien, and my sadness as repulsive. My relationship with Quinn Venom was an extension of me wanting to be seen as the image I'd created. Wanting to be desired like this was a new, exciting thing for me too. Desire is more than validation, as being seen to be as interesting as I now found myself. The feeling of someone thinking about you, your ideas, your mannerisms, once you've left the room, of being something that demanded and deserved that attention. I was learning to be porous, and at that time, desire became an act of absorption, of taking on characteristics, ideas, and images that I wanted. Of course, the space failed me, as all spaces do. Men were predatory. I grew out of wearing studded belts. I grew my fringe out, finished my eyeliner, forgot to buy more. I found other ways to engage with feelings than vulnerability and sensitivity. I googled Vampire Freaks last week. The website is now a Hot Topic-esque clothing selling store. R.I.P. Meatspace is a word used to describe the real or physical world, as in the opposite of cyberspace. First used in 2000, it's a weirdly visceral term compared to cyberspace, which sounds expansive and sparkling and void-like all at the same time, whereas Meatspace sounds bloody and raw. Meatspace conjures up images of us as people-shaped blobs of mince, stumbling around, fumbling, and elegant plotting. In Old English, meat actually meant food, suggestive of the value associated with the sustaining force of the real world. Meat space suggests heft, weight, something for your identity to be tethered to while exploring the wateryness of cyberspace. The word meat space is connected to the idea of digital dualism, where the internet and real life were considered separate in their existence, but inevitably seepage, dripping, overlap happens. The reality is more like a combination of cyberspace and meat space, something like cyber meat space. When things become images, they become fiction, artist Amalia Almond said. Your Instagram is exactly who you are as a person, my friend Anne said. In 1979, Sophie Cao performed a performance art piece, The Sleepers. She invited people to come sleep in her bed, usually for 8 hours at a time. She documented them intimately, took photographs and notes, watched them sleep, even asked them what age they wet their beds. In some photos, you can see bodies in her bed, curved in various stages of toss and turn. In a few of these photos, her bed is empty. These photos and notes were displayed alongside textual descriptions, the analytical nature of these descriptions jarring against the soft intimacy of her documentation. By making intimacy a spectacle, the artifice lies in the reenactment of the everyday being sleeping, reading, lying in bed inert, staring at the ceiling. All becomes intimate through surveillance. I think about how I engage with being seen, how being offered up to an audience suffuses the personal and light, as in the type of energy that bounces back and forth between object and I. What does my cyber meat space look like? I submitted a draft of this essay to this online nonfiction course I'm doing, and one of the editor's questions was, what panda-shaped holes exist now? And listening to the hotelier singing Make Me Feel Alive, make me believe all my selves align, and think about the ways in which my early performances of vulnerability, sensitivity, and emotion feed into the ways I enact myself now. I'm thinking about how I render myself in multiple ways, and I can see parallels. Curation of specifically me details, a best sensitive interior life, the curation of more open, vulnerable, and tender elements, and how these are things I want to foster across my cyber/meat spaces. About 2 months ago, there was this Instagram challenge, Until Tomorrow. The concept was to post an embarrassing picture of yourself, then caption it Until Tomorrow, and tag the person who sent you the original chain message. It was a collective act of remembering former selves and engaging in large-scale cringe at past iterations of yourself. I posted 3 pictures of myself from the emo vampire freaks phase. The photos an archive of yearning, attempts at sensitivity, self-expression, experimentation, a reminder of when I started seeking, carving, and molding panda-shaped holes in the world. This is my hole. It was made for me.
Panda is part of our project Playlist Joy, where she, along with Freya Daly-Sadgrove, Michael Sun, Vanessa Huron, and Tabani Suma, will share musings on the music that bring them happiness. Next up, we have Alistair Baldwin. Alistair is a writer and comedian based in Naarm. He's written for the ABC's The Weekly, Hard Quiz, and Get Crackin', the latter of which he also stars in as a very tired PA. In 2019, his play Lame was performed at Southbank Theatre as part of Melbourne Theatre Company's First Stage initiative. He's a former Wheeler Centre Hot Desk Fellow and has had work published by Acme Ideas, Un Magazine, Archer, SBS, and more. Please welcome Alistair.
Hello everyone, my name is Alistair Baldwin. Welcome to my bedroom. If this were an ordinary festival, only about 1/5 of the people currently watching would have been lucky enough to see inside. But now everyone gets VIP access, so small blessings. Before I read my piece, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to extend my respect to elders past and present. I'd also like to thank everyone at Emerging Writers Festival for so efficiently and expertly taking this public health crisis in their stride. Without much further ado, here's my piece about digital nostalgia. It doesn't have a name yet, but comment below what you think it should be called, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Is this relatable? It's raining as I write this, but not enough for my writing to be any good. So I go to my bookmarks bar and I put on a YouTube video called Piano ASMR 3-hour piano music and rain sounds. The music itself is a single refrain, played again and again, the keys hit with the lazy hand of a master pianist who knows they'll get the most views from the clips people pay the least attention to. The raindrops almost completely drown the piano out. They're heavy and ideal. Rain sound effects feel a bit like someone collected rain in a saucepan, reducing it down with sugar and cornstarch till it was thick and pourable. The constructed three-dimensionality of the video's ASMR rain sweetens the stereo sound of reality just outside my window. It's such an effective shortcut to introspection that it almost feels like cheating. I feel like writing is a protracted exercise in tricking your brain into the exact correct mood for what you want to write, hacking it with rain sound effects and scented candles and honey on toast and Instagram accounts of friends you've lost and enough coffee that you feel like you're in danger. In all its complexity, your brain is so easy to manipulate that it can manipulate itself. And with my rain and my fluffy dressing gown and my big mug that takes 2 hands to hold, my impersonation of a nostalgic recluse becomes actuality. This particular video was recommended to me by my close personal friend, the YouTube algorithm. I know algorithms are evil, but it's impossible not to feel intimately known by such a spot-on recommendation. Impossible to not see it as an act of love. I know it's emotionless and profit-driven, and perhaps worst of all, it's mathematics. But the algorithm has taken the time to get to know me, and that's got to be worth something. That's sort of how I look back on my own teenage years surfing the internet. An extended period of distance learning in the closest subject. Because before the internet, my self-image felt hazy and undefined demographic, but with each click, the consumer profile in my mind sharpened. Much like an algorithm, I learned who I was by the sites I visited. Deleting search history is so deeply burned into the muscle memory of every young queer that even now, as an out 24-year-old who has his own laptop and pays for his own internet, my hand reflexively veers to that top right drop-down menu, floating over keys like a glass over Ouija board, ready to excise a shame binge of Glee music videos from my digital bio. Every time I engaged in this time-honoured tradition as a teenager, I couldn't help but look over what I was about to delete, a bird's eye view of that day's travels on the net. Unlike a supermarket, which hamstrings you with things like availability and price, on the internet every search term is as easy and affordable to type as any other. There is no compromise, no dilution. Each search is a pure expression of want. This makes our search histories revealing. I mean, they wouldn't have invented the delete history button if they weren't. Seeing all my desire and curiosity compiled into a list created distance, and in that distance, I could really evaluate myself. In the gaps between the music I liked on Last FM and the music I listened to in secret YouTube tabs, I learned this user was infatuated with appearing cool, yet deep down was basic as hell. in the compulsive daily searches for new clinical trials using gene therapy to treat muscle wasting, I learned that this user was deeply ashamed of his body. Then, when these searches started being replaced by visits to #CripplePunk tumblers, where sick teens pimped their wheelchairs and canes with glitter, stickers and spikes, I learned this user's solution to shame was no longer in a cure, it was in community. The fact this user only made it to page 2 of XTube, but page 17 of GayTube, made me suspect that he was, shocker, gay. All but confirmed when he completed his 23rd OkCupid Am I Gay quiz in one sitting. The fact that he spent less than 5 minutes browsing the entire UWA course catalogue, read up on a few of the forensic anthropology units offered at ANU, yet somehow managed to track down the blog's VCA screenwriting students were required to keep for weekly writing exercises and checked back on them religiously through Year 12, taught me what his real dream was, and not just what he thought he should do. It only really sunk in that he was moving to Melbourne when I noticed he'd added maps of the city's tram lines to his bookmarks bar, so that he arrived prepared. It's hard to know what you really want when you're in it, especially when teen hormones compound every pure impulse with a mix of shame, fear, and fragility. There's something nice about how simply my teen search histories reduced the vastness of want down, how easy that made it to empirically know myself, to take a step back and identify the patterns I couldn't or wouldn't accept. It made it that much easier to live the life I really wanted to. I'd collected the cookies, I'd machine learned, and that meant my recommended for you algorithm was spot on. Thank you. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Alistair is hosting the panel In the Writers' Room, Writing for Screen, which is presented in partnership with Arts Access Victoria. He's also providing daily prompts for budding screenwriters as soon as the festival kicks off, so keep your eyes peeled for those. Bridget Caldwell-Bright is a Jingili Mudborough writer and editor based in Melbourne. She works as a freelance editor for Hardy Grant Books, as well as commissioning editor for the literary journal The Lifted Brow. She was previously co-editor for Archer Magazine's First Nations edition and managing editor for Black Brow, a Black women's collective edition of The Lifted Brow. Please welcome Bridget. Finally, we have Marina Lau. Jamie is a multidisciplinary artist and the author of Pink Mountain on Locust Island. With explorations focusing on language, Jamie's work mediates on a landscape exploring dislocation of culture and space. Her second novel, Gunk Baby, will be published in 2020.
Part 1. Creating Ecosystems and Oxygen. When you pick up from where you last left off in your intangible orientation of creation, what will begin to swarm around the suspension of a blinking line or the drying paint is ego, new perspective, emotional boundaries. These can gather around the aura of your actual self, making it very difficult to re-immerse and proceed with the imagined story or vision you had in mind. Every time I'm pulled to write fiction or create something, there is a very hallowed suspicion I take to the practice with me. What if I can't enter it again? What if the visualization has dissolved? You re-enter a simulated space, and to an extent, the environmental elements here are proceeding visually as they were, as if you and it had simultaneously been in a cryosleep, and the trees haven't grown. The lake is still running. The mold in the refrigerator is growing on leftovers, but the fresh ingredients are birthed by themselves in here naturally. In Sims, if you jump between worlds, the other is paused. The toddler stays a toddler with all the same actions that a toddler is able to assume. This perhaps is the most unworldly element of simulated environments, because in real life, if you look away, it is still growing. As you enter this simulated environment, note that what the creator, the original visualizer of it all, took from your previous reality, it fabricates your degree of presence and actuality in this new space, making you feel warmed to its palm. So much so that you allow inconsistencies to run under your feet, that these inconsistencies are actually comforting. Building simulated environments must involve so much of combining visions of utopias that are easy on the eye despite the blue light coming with it, shapes which imitate not only reality but cause an addiction to its shapes that are both soft and rigid, shapes that create cadences of movements which we can fathom other human beings through. To make it alive, take at least 3 dimensions of real life, convince the player of gravity, of approximately real-time communication with the space and bodies, reactions from those space and bodies back. And then how do you translate breath? A lot of simulated environments use music, ASMR Foley's, which circulates a feeling of the fluctuation which breath brings. Another way to create breath is to create clots in virtual flows. With breath comes the interruption of it. I mean an unevenness of it too. How to create life like breath is to create a sort of waiting, to convince the player as you convince shoppers in a shopping centre that something is missing from their seemingly whole existence. Yes, your character is here, but is your character enjoying the screen to the extent which it could be? Neopets kept its currency then. Habbo Hotel and Club Penguin had premium members with different colour hair, skins, clothes. Sims has expansion packs. You buy visual stimulus to make you care more about yourself. Advertising is then closely knit with the mental action of waiting, wanting. Waiting and wanting is supposedly human, supposedly reality. Then waiting and wanting is closely intertwined with breath. Maurizio Lazzarato formed the concept of immaterial labour, in which users build cultural meaning out of the mere usage of a virtual space, keeping their users there as if keeping them in a life-looking dome and asking them for their symptoms. Similar to clickbait and product placement, early forms of immersive advertisement was designed to create corporate income out of cultural meanings, which they would ask even children to gather. They ask them this by creating a shiny animation for them to live in. They want the animation to be a child's first thought on a Saturday. They are training the child to look for what's missing rather than what's there, and reward them for it, building future customers, future humans. An example of this is how Neopets created opportunities for children to make Neopoints by contributing to online surveys ran by the likes of McDonald's, cereal brands, and Disney. Visual opportunities, unlocking stimulus in return, creating variation of breath. Part 2, the offer of rest. Recently I found myself drifting into sleep-like moments earlier in the day. Somehow when you tease with time and reality, it feels like an immense reclamation of control, but when immersed in a virtual environment such as The Sims, being able to control the speed inside a lapse of time which with something as fragile as your fingertips makes you feel immensely unpracticed at it, like Adam Sandler in Adam Sandler's hit movie Click. The growth of the bodies from one solid thing to another surprises you, from child to teenager, the suddenness and the randomization of their new clothes, their new abilities, the features, how they were one thing and now just completely another, but it is to some extent realistic to the passageways of our memories. It's just too neatly rendered. When I was about 12, all these platforms were being introduced and popularized, and I finally got to play on some. When detaching and exiting from the browser, acclimatizing to the changed temperature of the sky, it reminded me of the feeling I got after taking a nap, waking from sleep in the middle of the day. When you wake from a nap, the usual justification of the killed time is that your body has had an opportunity to recuperate. It's been addressing the physical and mental mold that has settled on either side of your usual function. This feeling is like voluntary deprivation from life in order to repossess it. The only body which exists physically in a virtual space is the mind. You include it by making decisions. Then the act of moving the rest of your actual body, your skin, bones and organs, feeding the stomach, or rather than not feeding it, it becomes a sort of silent agreement between the two, that you've escaped from the body now in order to live in it later. With social media, the timing is just a bit different. Virtual immersion and the abandonment of the body is used to instead re-inhabit the best angle to view yourself from. One question occurs relevantly for all these social and social-seeming virtual spaces. Was there ever such thing as having simultaneously a lonely existence and a wildly social? Part 3. Publication and sleep. In virtual spaces, we choose how much we want to give of ourselves, like in writing. When writing fiction, I give almost nothing of my own self deliberately, maybe just a mannerism and the feeling it is to perform that. Mostly it's a projection of the things orbiting around my body to make fiction alive. Play with the graph dealing with intersections of consistency and contradiction, make the sky non-blues and the things that characters consume alien, to make things alien but familiar. Dogechi Bose describes the emotional moat she constructs around herself when she is listening to one song on repeat. This is how I like to write fiction. Literally, I repeat a song as a way of lingering on the idea which had occurred at the time of it, but also metaphorically. To grab a feeling and let it sit around me before moving on, making it infinite, so as to view it from multiple angles, orbiting. Everybody's version of this dealing with happens at different paces. Therefore, in this reality, the act of dealing with, the act of observing, making something both alien and familiar simultaneously, allowing a perpetual orbit, it must become a private world. And this creative privacy feels like taking off your coat at the end of the day. So in the same way, people buy their virtual experience as a matter of being able to relieve their shoulders. You've caught up with the errands in your virtual experience now. So your body is tired and your brain is overstimulated. So you log out knowing next time you log in, your body will be where it left off. In virtual worlds, your body will still gather itself again to be a penguin or a Christmas jub-jub with the right amount of money in your pockets as long as you log in. You will choose where you want to stand to view yourself. You will enjoy domestic things through a second pair of eyes. You will enjoy murder without remorse. You will enjoy sex with eyes and genitals only, no extra bits of skin you don't like. Let ASL graph you, form you. And as you rest here, you will, as you do, in realness, ask yourself, what is missing? And discover that it might be available to you.
Jamie is working on a collaborative short story project with the wonderful 3D artist Craig Stubbs-Race, which combines writing and, you guessed it, 3D art. Thank you to all of our wonderful speakers tonight. I hope you're giving them a big round of applause wherever you're watching from. As I'm sure you know, this festival is nothing without its people, so huge thanks to our brilliant team for holding it together. We're a tiny team as it is, and this year we've been even smaller. I'm not quite sure how we managed all of this, but we did. I want to say a huge thank you to our Executive Director and my co-CEO, Alice Muelling, our Program Coordinator, Millie Baylis, our Marketing and Publicity Coordinator, Danny Lever, our Operations Manager, Zoe Rabb, and our Digital Producer, Pip Grills. I also want to say a huge thank you to Izzy Roberts-Orr, who finished up as Emerging Writers Festival Artistic Director right when we decided to change the entire thing, and has been hugely supportive. Thank you to our board for supporting our vision, and us, especially during this weird COVID time. Thank you to our major partners, Creative Victoria, the City of Melbourne, the Wheeler Centre, Hachette, and the Saturday Paper, as well as our education partners, Swinburne. Thank you all for investing in emerging storytellers. And lastly, a cheeky thank you for making a tax-deductible donation to support the festival that you love. Seriously though, good art costs money, and for us a little bit goes a long way. Over half of our program is free, and we're committed to keeping ticket prices for paid events low so that practicing writers can attend the festival. This has been especially important in planning EWF20, as we know our audience are also our artists, and artists are having a particularly rough time at the moment. Please do consider donating. You can find more information on how to do so via the website. We're really proud of this year's program, and we really hope you enjoyed participating in it as much as we enjoyed putting it together. This year's brilliant artwork is thanks to Tori J. Morty, and the design is by our favourite, Matthias at Loop Studio. So, we hope you find vibrancy and joy in EWF20. We hope you find reflection, we hope you find connection. We also hope you find some new writers to read, ways to create, and things to experiment with for yourself. And we hope you're as excited to attend as we are to put this festival on. Head over to the website at emergingwritersfestival.org.au to see the program in full and start planning your EWF20 from the comfort of wherever you are. And have a chat to your friends and loved ones, and even at us on Twitter at Emerging Writers to talk about your own digital nostalgia feels. We will see you around the internet.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.